Well, welcome to all you lovely folks joining me here nice and early over at Marvel Snap Zone. Welcome back for another Infinite Decks of the Week segment where we take a look with you at some of the brilliant deck lists shared on social media this week that have already made it to Infinite Rank this early in the season. Very, very exciting stuff. Just going to get a forecloser question out of the way. We are getting otherworldly numbers of requests for, hey, Marvel Snap Zone, when is the next tier list? Don't panic, the tier list is on the way. We did put up a big old tweet about this, which if you don't follow us on Twitter, you should probably do that. About, essentially, we didn't want to release a tier list while we were still trying to figure out information. A lot of us were still trying to get cards from Series 4 and Series 5, still trying to, play with them, see what they played like. And then Silver Surfer gets added into the mix, and we have to figure that out as well. So we didn't want to release a tier list while we were trying to figure out all of that. There was still quite a lot to figure out there. But Den has done a fantastic job, the lovely Den CCG, at grinding through some data and is looking to have a brand new tier list with you this Tuesday, which means I will be doing a video accompaniment to that tier list on Tuesday as well. So if you've been looking forward to the next meta update that is coming for you on Tuesday, stay tuned. We look forward to having it with you very soon. However, today, we're going to show you some of the early contenders for decks that have already made it all the way up to the Infinite Rank. Been doing a fantastic job in the hands of several people who have decided to share it with us on social media over on Twitter. So, we're going to hop on over to the very first one here and walk you through slowly but surely this kind of structure that we've got going on. Important to note, of course, that these decks have to have done very, very well this early to get there. We have to discuss kind of what the early season grind means in terms of skill and investment. Of course, being at rank 70 already is going to be a nice boost for you if you were Infinite last season, but that still takes 300 cubes or 280 if you take your bonus rank into effect in that time frame. So far, the players featured this week, we want to give them some recognition, not only because they've had a lot of time to play the game, but they've had the ability to focus for long periods and abuse their environment and make the most of that atmosphere. It's also especially important to say that as of reaching Infinite on day 1 or day 2 of the season isn't something doable with 1 or 2 cube wins. You have to consistently raise the stakes through snapping in order to get there that fast, which, also cutting your losses when you need to. So compared to other card games where grinding to the top rank is mostly a matter of time and learning the intricacies of your deck, Snap's grind adds complexity of understanding betting concepts, and that's a very important factor we wanted to draw some attention to. So starting off with this lovely list here, Bast getting their own archetype, ? Essentially is the thought process behind this one. This deck didn't get to Infinite by itself, if we're being honest, as the player changed to a build abusing Lamentis 1 in the very last stretch. Simply, however, this deck went from rank 70 to about rank 90 over a short period of time, which is still a very powerful testament to this deck's power, even if Emmanuel Bertranto, the player behind this deck, only took it up to rank 90 before the location kicked in for the hot location. So do keep that one in mind. And the more that we look at it, the more it reminds us of the deck that we featured in the best decks of Series 4-5 piece not so long ago, including Valkyrie. We don't know whether or not Valkyrie is just not a card that's available here yet, or if they just prefer Iron Man or Blue Marvel, but seeing more of that idea might indicate the emergence of an archetype here overall. The goal of this deck is to leverage Bast, a card that is continuing to showcase its power more and more in more and more decks. He buffs every single card in this deck except for Mysterio. Most of all, we can see Adam Warlock being a card that's being stuck into this deck, which is a card that obviously isn't seen all that much, and is definitely benefiting the most from Bast in addition, Bast addition to the game in general. Otherwise, this feels like a very basic Swarm deck, very low to the ground, very Kazoo style in what you're trying to accomplish, but with different cards. Also, with just Ant-Man as a really important one-cost card, this doesn't feel particularly weak to Killmonger, the usual nemesis of decks that try and play this style of game. With Lamentis 1 now joining the other locations in normal rotation, this deck is one that we definitely want to recommend trying if you have Bast, as we think it could probably function without Luke Cage if that happens to be the one that you don't have access to. Up next, of course, the big menace in the room, the deck most people are talking about, Negative Silver Surfer. It's a real deck, it's here, it's in the room, and it's doing all kinds of wonderful stuff. According to Gusian Copula's post, I apologize for butchering everyone's names. I suck with names, but Gusian, I apologize for ruining your name. It only took them 6 hours to get from rank 70 to rank 100, one of the fastest climbs you can have, with a staggering 50 cubes an hour. But the fascinating part is that this climb was done during Lamentis 1 as a featured location, while not running a list that was tailored specifically for it. Instead of Death, the start of Lamentis 1's time, Silver Surfer feels like he also gained a bit of momentum, and might have settled the debate around whether Sarah or Mr. Negative is the default card that goes alongside it. So no Sarah in this list. In this build without Sarah, praised by other top players in the SnapFan Discord, this deck simply looks to abuse a lot of cards with the highest high roll potential. Mostly Bast, Silver Surfer, Mr. Negative as a trio that make the deck enter another dimension, both for points of unpredictability and sometimes just raw stats. As a result, this deck may very well be the best one to rack up 8 cube wins, thus being perfect for an early season grind all the way up to Infinite. Back when Series 4 and Series 5 were announced, we remember talking about a potential big comeback for Mr. Negative, and a lot of theory-crafted deck lists to point in that direction. With Silver Surfer now in the game and the new season showing the deck as one of the best in this first week, I think we can safely assume one of the strongest archetypes in Snap's short history might be making a recurrence here, with Mr. Negative coming up back to the top. Up next is one of my more favourite decks, to be honest, politely referred to as She-Hulk Pile, which is a nice way of putting this one. But he's looking to abuse some very, very cool synergies. Death was in the deck that Gap used here to reach Infinite during Lamentis 1's featured time, but they indicated the card they should be playing in that slot if Lamentis 1 is not around was Titania to take her place afterwards. So we're going to showcase that version of the deck on screen, given that Lamentis is no longer around. Here the idea is to abuse the synergy that exists between Quinjet and Moon Girl, the former reducing the latter to, cheaper cards that you can play more and more of. As a result, we open a lot of very explosive turn 6 plays with this, using things like She-Hulk, the Demons from the Hood, Maximus, these kind of things for our own points, and then cards like Juggernaut and Polaris to control where your opponent's points go instead. The last part of this deck, the early game, seems to be more of a destroy, disrupt kind of package, with Carnage and Viper being great cards once the Hood is on the table. Logically, with She-Hulk in the deck, Sunspot makes a lot of sense, and might warrant a potential Infinite in the deck maybe, as Quinjet could allow you to play cards Moon Girl copied alongside the Infinite on turn 6 sometimes. I really like these kind of builds early in a season, as they tend to be very surprising. Once again, a very key trait to generating many high-stakes game wins as possible without the opponent retreating. Unless you know about this deck, you surely are going to believe it's a Devil Dinosaur deck, which, when you see Moon Girl and see your opponent copying their hand, and you might be unable to figure out what's happening when your opponent passes the turn on turn 5 with 2 She-Hulks in their hand, and that's very cool and very exciting stuff. Last but not least, we have my favourite deck that made it to Infinite this week. This thing is sweet. Chiyotashi's ramp list from the Asian region of Marvel Snap's Game Zone. If you want to see some gameplay with this deck, we actually played it live on stream at the end of last night's stream, and we racked up the cubes. We had a great time dumpstering people with ramped out copies of Leech. In every card game I have always been a part of, Asia always seems to have something very different about their metagames compared to Europe or America, and it seems like Marvel Snap might not be different, as I haven't had many discussions about the Electro ramp decks outside of being part of the new Galactus archetype overall. Here this user reaches Infinite with some old school style ramp looking to beat its opponent simply as it plays bigger cards. No Galactus, no Destroyer, no Hobgoblin or the other cards you would normally expect to see in some of these types of decks. Instead, we're gaining energies and using them for lots and lots of stats and beat me if you can. The only card that seems to be included to annoy the opponent is Leech, which actually makes a lot of sense during Lamentis 1's turns. It kind of cancelled out Death's cost reduction. That's still a thing that's going to matter alongside Death and She-Hulk if those are dominating forces in the game. However, Leech also fantastic against all these Silver Surfer decks that are looking to have big, powerful turn 6s that will no longer be able to generate that kind of stats. Seems like the card might finally have its time in the sun. I'm looking forward to seeing whether we see more Leech going forward. Lastly, and a big part of the reason why Den chose to feature this deck, there are no Series 4 or 5 cards in this deck whatsoever. It is pull 3 and below, assuming Black Panther was obtained in the last month's Battle Pass. Even then, I'm not sure that that card is required for this deck, as it's mostly here just to be a raw stat stick and provide you with large amounts of stats on a body you're ramping into. As always, the start of a season is a great occasion to rethink what we believe are the best and worst decks in Marvel Snap, and to be honest, I would never have considered this Electro deck to be able to make Infinite in the first 3 days of the game. Similarly, the Moon Girl Quinjet pairing gaining traction is a super super interesting one, considering both cards have been around forever, and this probably means that She-Hulk may be the missing piece that allowed that deck to be created on this unused synergy up until now. These last few days probably put an end to the questions around Bast and Silver Surfer. Yes, both cards are very, very good and worth building around. With the tier list being the next piece coming on Tuesday, we have no doubts those two powerhouses will push the decks built around them to be among the best in the current metagame, and we look forward to sharing that with you. But that is enough for today's piece. I hope you've enjoyed these decks and found something that may inspire you on the Marvel Snap ladder yourself. If you want to be featured in this series of decks that made it to Infinite, you can drop a message in our community Discord server. Let us know when you make Infinite and show us what you did it with. Tag us directly on Twitter. You can tag DenCCG, Howling Minds, or Marvel Snap Zone, and we'll be sure to try and highlight all the sweet brews you may send our way. But until next time, I have been Howling Minds, you have been amazing, and this has been Marvel Snap Zone. Take care.